So good evening and welcome to DIA's Readings in Contemporary Poetry series. This is our second event of the fall series, and my name is Megan Whitko, and it's my pleasure to welcome everybody here this evening. This series was reinstated in 2011 in partnership with our series curator, Vincent Katz. And these monthly readings highlight commonalities amongst poets and bring their work into a larger conversation with one another. So it's my great pleasure to welcome our two poets who will be reading this evening, Raphael Rubinstein and Mónica de la Torre. Thank you both for generously agreeing to be a part of the series tonight. I also want to extend some thank yous to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, as their support helps make these evenings possible. And of course, we want to give a special thank you to Brooklyn Brewery, who provides the cold beverages for us tonight, and also to DIA's staff, particularly Blair, Claire, and Max, who are here to help us and coordinate tonight's program. So following our first reader, we'll take a brief 10-minute intermission, and the beer will still be available then, so take a break then, and we'll return with our second speaker of the evening. So it's my pleasure now to give a warm welcome to Vincent and invite him up to introduce our first poet. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for coming. Mónica de la Torre is the author of Public Domain and Talk Shows, as well as two collections in Spanish, The Happy End and For. Her work has been published in the journals Aufgabe, Art in America, Convolution, Freeze, and Triple Canopy's Corrected Slogans. She is senior editor at Bomb magazine. Random has become the new normal, and normalcy the exception. The city is defined by its incongruities. Thus begins Mónica de la Torre's 40 Nameless Cities, Invisible Cities, 40 Windows, Ruins. This new piece relates to her series All Welcome, which is based on the artist Martin Kippenberger's gallery-size installation, The Happy End of Kafka's America, based, of course, on Kafka's America. De la Torre writes that All Welcome is a polyphonic bricolage of interviews, job postings, questionnaires, and materials related to work, all specifically taking place in the settings devised by Kippenberger. Throughout her work, de la Torre has made use of found materials. Yet, what is remarkable is how she has lovingly crafted not only newly exquisite materials, but also a tone that is identifiably her own. That tone encompasses a sense of humor, an indignant outrage at injustice and excess, and a delicately humane belief in the possibility of positive change. Reading her Views from Chairs, inspired by Kippenberger, inspired by Kafka, one is amazed by de la Torre's invention. She seems able to spin endless imaginations of experiences not yet or perhaps never to be encountered. Something similar underpins her neo-investigative work, such as her piece Doubles from Public Domain, in which a listserv request for information on a person named Mónica de la Torre leads to endless miscommunication and misconception, but also humor and tenderness. Much of de la Torre's work has a strong oral performative component. I'm curious as to how she will meld the conceptual, the investigative, and the performative tonight. To find out, please help me welcome Mónica de la Torre.
Thank you so much, Vincent. I'm very moved. I almost cannot talk. So thank you very much. He said it all. I'm also so glad you introduced All Welcome and the Kippenberger piece, because then I don't have to do it. Every time I introduce it, I forget an important part, so then I feel like what I read makes no sense. Thank you all for being here. I am so thrilled to share the bill with Raphael Rubinstein, not only a poet I deeply admire and respect, but also a dear friend whose poetry I've followed over the years in its many different iterations. So, thank you. I will start with the 40 Nameless Cities, Invisible Cities, 40 Windows, Ruins piece, and then I'll move on to the Kippenberger. Kafka, all welcome. All city is citation, cities, città. Some of the city's attractions will seem familiar to visitors. They've seen them in other cities. We long for the city. Longings are already memories. Palimpsest city, the mere name of the urban center, contains its whole past in it. We move across the streets as we move across written pages. We are summoned, asked to repeat their discourse. I heart New York. Our memory of the city is a beehive in whose compartments we place what we would like to remember. Any city takes its shape from the desert to which it opposes itself. Contrast is an organizing principle. Upon arriving in the city, the traveler finds a past she did not know she had. In every new place, what she no longer is awaits her. Unrealized futures are the dead branches of the past. The more we get lost, the more we understand the logic of the cities we have traveled through before becoming disoriented. This city contains all the futures once imagined for it, even those that ceased being possible the moment they were imagined. In this city, the exchange of memories is the most common transaction. Anything imaginable can be dreamed in the city, but even the wildest dream is a riddle hiding a wish, or its opposite, a fear. This city is populated by strangers who, upon passing each other by, imagine various encounters with them. As soon as their eyes lock, they flee, aghast almost, seeking other strangers as the protagonists of their daydreams. Here, there are only departures, no returns. The moods of those successively contemplating the city give it different shapes. Impossible to know which of its facets is truer than the others. Random has become the new normal, and normalcy the exception. The city is defined by its incongruities. This city's inhabitants live with less uncertainty than the inhabitants of other cities. They are convinced that the network supporting them is provisional. Upon arriving in the city, everything we had ever imagined about it was overwritten. Relationships between the inhabitants of this city are visible by the cords connecting their respective homes. The city has become impassable. In the plazas, the same conversations that have been taking place for years continue to go on. The exchanges are exactly the same. It's the participants in the conversations who keep being replaced. A city with no depth, verso and recto, a sheet of paper with a figure on each side. They're inextricable, yet invisible to each other. The city's daily upkeep leaves a definitive trace in its wake. Yesterday's detritus piled up on top of the day before yesterday's detritus, and so on. The name of a city in the distance is one thing. Once you arrive in it, it takes on another name. Why is there no end to the building of the city? Because its destruction keeps getting postponed. Fin de cita. End of citation. So just a little quick description on the all welcome piece. It's essentially like a big job fair of sorts for the Nature Theater of Oklahoma, which is the largest theater in the world. It's so large, you don't know what's inside the theater and what's outside the theater. So each of the pieces that I'll read is a sort of vignette taking place in these settings. And everything should be clear after that. Available positions. Sitting erect, pelvis curved out, cross-legged, or with legs parallel. Slumping, pelvis curved in. Sitting erect, slightly leaning forward and resting elbows and arms on desktop. Reclining on chair, propping up feet on desktop. Sitting against back of chair, cross-legged or with legs parallel. Plopped arms over armrests, legs open wide. Backward with legs wrapping around back of chair. Propped up with chair while standing. Fast asleep, resting torso and arms on desktop, with arms pillowing head. Propping elbows on open book on desk, hands supporting forehead or smoothing out hair. Plunked, head sunk into chest. What is your position? So each one has a number, each setting. So this one's number 17. At an improvised desk with a door for a top, with a hole in the middle due to missing glass panels, a migrant worker talks to a recruiter. Recruiter, how are you doing today? Worker, I'm pretty bored and I want to play in theater. How's your English? My English is no good. Really? What do you mean? My English is not very well. My English is no English. My English is nowhere. My English is not good and it is heard badly. My English is no frequently. My English is no native, so apologies to everyone. Recruiter, congratulations, you're hired. If we sense that someone's use of language might increase activity in our audience's corrugator muscles, or do the opposite, prompting zygomatic tension, we employ them at the drop of a hat. I am shockingly unqualified. I can't even type, for example. But I'll go to Oklahoma, 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 Oklahoma. Number 25. A caterer seated at a teak desk in a late 1900s double-width dining chair interviews a woman applying to the position of line cook. She sits in a generic gray office chair upholstered in a fried egg fabric sunny side up. Tell me a little bit about your background. I was brought up to eat with my fork and knife, with my hands on the table instead of my feet, like the Americans. What's your favorite dish? Social pasta. What's your favorite ingredient? It's a toss-up between eggs and butter. Butter is like letters. You can't make anything without it. And eggs are so versatile, they're the ultimate soft sculptures. Of course, huevos, cojones. Justice hasn't been done to the egg. Warhol's already had the banana. An egg is white and flat. How can that be turned into a colored picture? If you turn it around this way and that, you'll come up with something. What's your philosophy in the kitchen? I repurpose common leftovers, say Parmesan cheese. Labor is a thing of the past. As an ingredient, especially if grated infra-thin, Parmesan might be visible or invisible, non-retinal. More and more, it has ceased to be an additive only. Now it is the base for dishes made with Parmesan rind stock. I repurpose common leftovers. I'm a believer in ready-made flavor. A candidate for the position of furniture tester is seen around the floor jotting notes on the chairs she sits in. Her reports include chairs she has sat in previously and those she will sit in at some point in the future, for she is confident she'll get the job, perhaps overly so. View from an Aeron chair. A half view of greenery cut off by blinds. Pine cones hanging in pairs like testicles. Brain balls, someone had said at a pool. We were in it, looking up at someone getting out. This angle replicates that one, but the view is more animated, less peopled. The sky's change-ups, reminders that this would not drag on forever, despite the ergonomic ease afforded by the seat, first devised for geriatric care, then stripped down. If the elderly spent the whole day in recliners, so could dot-commers in their Aerons. It seemed rational if A, then B. And at least there was no symbolic logic with eliminins and retinins. No lasting premises either. We had been priced out of the area. No sooner than the conclusion had been accepted as consequent and part and parcel of a universe of discourse, we had come to realize the sense in having new places to leave. This was the chair's democracy, particularly this one with its form-fitting mesh, forsaking all foam and padding. with no overheating to cloud the sitter's judgment. Still, the office chair's revolution is an oxymoron. It's recyclable, and that matters. View from a womb chair. Not in fetal position, curled in, but the opposite. Spread out, yet fully supported, encouraged, in fact, to take any position imagined. What's one to desire from a seated configuration? If audacity requires averting devolution, a coming out of the shell, the less prescribed the sitter's orientation turns, the more the chair's potential unfolds, and the other way around. Armrests easily serve as leg rests when reclining on either side. The chair's open arms welcome all. Slumping, varying degrees of verticality and horizontality, legs extended, bent, tucked, or even in lotus position. A permutational site, its support unconditional. With limbs reaching out of the rib cage, expanding to the seat back's width, shoulders go down. For composure, a formula. What a progressive view of parenting. Just enough protection, harnessing the body, yet prodding it beyond a threshold of comfort. Number 41. A consultant discusses her vision for the company's strategic plan with the company manager. She sits before a lab table with 5 different body organs preserved in jars of formaldehyde. Company manager. You said organizations should function like a living organism. Might you take a look at these organs and explain to us which of their functions can be applied to office life? Consultant. Here they're nearly disfigured by death and pickling fluid. You wouldn't want that in an organization. If preservation is your priority, what you'll get is atrophy and inhibited growth. Company manager. Of course. How about you just identify the organs and take it from there? Consultant. In this jar, you have the amygdala, after which human resources management should be modeled. It is the brain's fear center, regulating reward and punishment systems, or to give it a positive spin, motivation. It processes negative thoughts and irritability at violations of personal space. Its size correlates to individuals' creative thinking and emotional intelligence. It's mind-blowing that such a small part of the brain would be responsible for the big 5 personality traits, you know? Ocean, or a canoe, depending on whether you'd like to be in the water, fully immersed in it, or on it, peacefully crossing over it. Company manager, please, in the interest of time. Consultant, yes. As a regulator of emotional responses, the amygdala determines feelings of interconnectedness as much as HRM shapes the staff's identification with the company. To the point, strategic incentives keep the staff happy. Everything from Muzak to 24-hour gyms, espresso bars, free snack food, field trips, community gardens, retreats, bonuses, you name it. The ability to bring your own device makes a big difference. Not only will staffers get the job done, they will also be nicer to their colleagues, which will reduce hostility and apprehension in the workplace. Company manager. The organ is glowing in the jar. Consultant. It must be overstimulated. You'll want to make sure your staff members have outlets for their sexual behavior. Otherwise, the risk is that they suffer an amygdala hijack and become violent. Company manager. What are you suggesting? Consultant. It would be my honor to devise a business plan for the company that meets everyone's needs. For that, I would conduct private interviews with your staffers. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, especially when it comes to something as personal as the sublimation of erotic impulses. I mean, ultimately, that's what's at stake. Company manager. Mind you, the clock is ticking. Consultant. Next, we have the hippocampus, which is responsible for forming long-term memories. Archivists should function as efficiently as the hippocampus does. Often what we think is worth archiving isn't worth the effort in the long run, and what we toss turns out to be valuable. We wonder, too, if the mere fact of not having something any longer is precisely what bestows its mysterious value on it. But if we hesitate, we end up hoarding. A healthy hippocampus makes no such mistakes. If every stimuli received, every thought and sensation ever had, were consciously taking into account every second of our waking lives, How would we function? Remembering can be a time suck. But the hippocampus is wise and ruthless in its selectivity. To think of the countless minutiae it relegates to the trash heap, minute by minute. And who tracks the archivist's work? Consultant, you entrust the archive with articulating the organization's history the same way you entrust your hippocampus with your own declarative memory. You don't question what's forgotten. For the most part, you can't even remember it. Next, we have a thumb. Hard to tell if a male or a female's, but in evolutionary terms, it matters little. It is simple and an incredibly complex matter. The power and precision grips gave us countless advantages over other species. When we became bipeds, our hands were freed from the demands of walking on all fours. Having opposable thumbs allowed us to swing clubs and throw rocks at our opponents. All corporate strategies to succeed need to have a firm grasp of these principles. What are the company's prehensile activities? How can rivals be kept at bay? Not by clubbing them, I hope. Consultant, not at all. Our rule of thumb is shun primitive behavior, but welcome primitive impulses. What do we have here in the next jar? The pea-sized pituitary gland. Excellent. Think of it as managers across a chain of command overseeing the company's daily workflow, its metabolism and production rhythms, its growth and sustainability. Above all is the CEO in a Turkish seat. That's a joke, by the way. The pituitary is enclosed in a bone-like case called the sella turcica. Why not have one built, actually? It could be a powerful symbol, lest a staffer forget where the buck stops. Company manager, interesting. But surely you understand our company. We don't have a CEO. We have an artistic director. The office chairs surrounding us are ghosts of obsolete hierarchies. We keep them as reminders of what can go wrong. Consultant, there could not be a better segue to the next organ, the pineal gland. Look at it, a gorgeous, if a bit deformed, pine cone. Company manager, so what about it? Consultant. It's the only gland that has no double, no left and right. If there's an artistic director, there's one only, with a non-fungible vision. And if his or her vision is fungible, you don't want it lodged at the center of the cranium. This gland regulates circadian rhythms, delicately balancing wakeful hours and sleep, awareness and dreams. I am no theosophist, but I do subscribe to rational, positive views. If, for Madame Blavatsky, the pineal gland was the third eye, for Descartes, it was the principal seat of the soul. I got that from Wikipedia. Doesn't it sound nice? Yet, it does make you wonder how many seats Descartes thought the soul had. Regardless, it is the missing link between the physical and spiritual worlds. Every night it coaxes us into surrendering control and venturing into the luminous darkness or the dark luminosity of our dream world, depending on whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of person. This position does not concern us, however. Predisposition does. View from a management chair. With the information on hand, impossible to discern the cubicle's wood. Without question, it's an honest material. It's just that the online database with digital images and descriptions of various types magnifies, without much reliability it seems, the differences in their grains. With no basis except for its blondness, and such issues are received knower, without ever before having considered the matter, the guess with regard to the source genus is that it's oak, birch, or hard maple. Without any of those trees being native to the region, though, it's up in the air. With nothing else competing for the retina's attention, without any visual input other than the panel's loopy growth rings, with only a keyboard in sight, a lamp, a flower-patterned tissue box, and scraps, without being a dendrochronologist, time is the one thing to manage. View from a folding chair. Never decorative, embodying a chair's provisional character. Utilitarian, never just there, called on to serve. Communal, egalitarian, leveling its occupants, gathered for an occasion. Rarely will it hold the sitters captive. Its precariousness invites walkouts, even when secured by an admittance fee. Repositionable, it favors assorted geometries of attention. the frontal and single-focused, the shifting and radial. Irreverent, whether in an institutional setting or not, signaling reversible orders. Possibly carnivalesque, displaying an upside-down world, as in a projection within a projection. A projection of the high desert landscape and transit surrounding an old ice plant in Marfa, requiring no other technology but a lens in a dark room, ironically inverted in this picture of a tiny, tiny fraction of the planet, with no Google logo and copyright date camouflaged to appear like a wisp of a stratus cloud, is the electrical plant across the street. Grids reversed, as is the soundtrack extemporaneously produced by the cars and pickup trucks seen fleeting by from east to west, though by the sound we know they're going west to east, and vice versa. These are moving images to experience, but not keep. Unsung, stacked, piled against a wall, or hidden in closets, folding chairs will be counted on again, since plastic palace people, they're both transience and ritual. Welcome into the fold. Who cares what the future brings? And the last piece, number 15. A Sacco armchair, that 1968 Italian student movement, anti-design statement against the strictures and corporatization of modern design, that celebration of the body, most commonly known as a beanbag chair, is placed behind a curved L-shaped teak desk. This is the site for interviews with candidates for the position of guerrilla advertiser. Duties include: 1. Tweet liberation slogans and dumbfounding quotes to the company's followers. No contextual information or authors' names are to be included in the tweets. 2. In an effort to further disorient the company's followers, develop strategies to conceal the source of the tweets. A few examples of the tweets. To sit is a verb. The trouble with palliatives is that they become the whole life. Images are the murder of the present. The fun is foreseeing the unforeseeable and getting screwed anyway. Mind your wound. 3. As usage of commercial cell phone jammers is illegal in many districts, develop systems circumventing current legislation to disable mobiles and prevent them from receiving signals from base stations. 4. Design forms to interrupt wireless radio signals and jam satellite communications. Some of the more common methods include transmitting the following to the opponent's receiving equipment: atmospheric random noise, recorded samples of applause, whistling, or laughing, bagpipe-like sounds or howling ones, and signals resembling sparks and the cries of seagulls. And duty number 5, develop ways to hack global positioning systems, as well as other navigational tools, including Google Maps and iMaps, to lead users to places better than their original destinations. Thank you.
Raphael Rubinstein is a New York-based poet and art critic. Among his books of poetry are The Afterglow of Minor Pop Masterpieces and The Basement of the Café Rilke. His poems have recently appeared in Fence, Vanitas, and Privacy Policy, the anthology of surveillance poetics. Raphael Rubinstein has long been using procedural frameworks to gird his poems. As an admirer of Harry Matthews and other Oulipo writers, Rubinstein, like them, has used rules and restrictions to structure some of his poems. His inventiveness, humor, and compassionate twists take his works far beyond anything that could be seen as coldly calculating or a parlor game. Not that Oulipo is those things, but it has been accused of them. It is, in fact, Rubinstein's passion for cultural artifacts that gives his poems their own unique cultural valence. Whether it's Nouvelle Vague cinema, late 70s post-punk rock bands, or French literary theory, or more commonly, all three colliding, Rubinstein evokes while creating and provokes while titillating. In the afterglow of minor pop masterpieces, the first set of poems is programmed as follows: a two-stanza poem in which each stanza has 2 lines, each line 2 words, and each word 2 letters. Next, a 3-stanza poem in which each stanza has 3 lines, each line has 3 words, and each word 3 letters. This continues through the number 8. The one for number 6, entitled 6 Sex, is particularly exciting. Somehow, within his strictures and heightened by them, Rubinstein manages in lurid detail to document an imagined sex romp through Europe. Here's a snippet. Cannes, tanned nymphs bathed, German taking photos moaned. Monaco, pretty casino fille sulked around gaming tables. Common lament, nobody greedy screws. Each word is 6 letters. It's pretty hard to do. Rubinstein, with his impressive cultural knowledge, is brilliant at inventing period film scripts, bands, and poets. The reader experiences a familiar rush hearing or reading a Rubinstein description, even when, as in the poem Illusion is a Gangster Girl, a poem I hope he will consider reading tonight, he proves, by accumulating alternate explanations for the title phrase, that none has the imprimatur of veracity. Reality is a tricky thing for Rubinstein. More and more, as time goes on, among the other cultural forms he cites, reveres, and models, there is poetry, and Rubinstein's own poetry, operating within a slightly less brightly lit, but nonetheless exuberant sphere. In Poetry as a Non-Professional Experiment, he writes, "This is a poem about being in a poem that was never supposed to be this big a part of my life. Fortunately for us, it is. Please join me in welcoming Raphael Rubinstein."
I don't know how to thank you, Vincent, for the invitation, for the introduction, and for pairing me with Mónica. I can't imagine anyone I would like to read with more. I'm going to be reading mostly recent poems, and I don't want to disappoint anyone, but there are very few Oulipian constraints in these poems, and maybe one has one, but it's sort of, lately I've been going into another direction maybe, or other directions. But so the first poems I'm going to read, the first 3 poems are from an ongoing collection, unpublished still, called Dead Troubadours, and all the poems are about musicians, more musicians rather than music. And the first poem is about 2 English musicians, Pete Doherty, who was came to renown in this band, the Libertines, and Amy Winehouse, who needs no introduction. It's called A Tale of 2 Stars. Pete's a Hexham boy, Amy's a London girl. Pete's a famous junkie, Amy drinks up the world. Pete's red coronet, Amy's Ronette's beehive. Pete's Rat Pack hat, Amy's slinky jive. Pete's OD'd once more, Amy's on the mend. Pete's been dropped by his label, Amy's round the bend. Pete's ready for his comeback, Amy's lost her voice. Pete's been filmed shooting up, Amy's out with the boys. Pete's in court again, Amy's back in rehab. Pete's in jail once more, Amy's out of rehab. Pete's in Wormwood Scrubs, Amy's in permanent heaven. Pete survived past 30, Amy's dead at 27. Pete Doherty, I guess now is 35. The next poem is One way to think about it is as a mashup between Frank O'Hara's famous poem, The Day Lady Died, and the perhaps equally famous song by Chic, Good Times. And the poem is really about Bernard Edwards, who was the bass player for Chic, who died in 1996 from pneumonia just after a concert he gave in Tokyo. The day Bernard Edwards died. It is 10:20 in Tokyo, a Wednesday. Rumor has it that it's getting late. On stage at the Budokan, wearing gray suit, sunglasses, reprising the bass line that launched a movement, pneumonia flooding his lungs, Bernard Edwards leans once more into the breakdown of Good Times. Time marches on, just can't wait. It's really simple sounding, but if there's any bass players in the room, just try to play that song. It's almost impossible. The clock keeps turning. Why hesitate? It's 11:20 in Tokyo, a Wednesday. He is sweating a lot by now, maybe thinking about those early days of the Big Apple Band and Allah and the knife-wielding punks, when no one in the industry could deal with two black guys from New York playing metalloid fusion rock. It is 12:20 in Tokyo, a Thursday. He's collapsed on the sofa in his hotel room, breath slipping away. When Fab Five Freddy and Futura 2000 ran up on stage at Bonds and started freestyling, that was okay. It just felt like poets riffing, but not when that bass line turned up on Sugar Hill Gang's record. You silly fool, you can't change your fate. Have so few bars of music ever echoed so far? Not the intros to Beethoven's Fifth or Sacre de Printemps, not the most out-there passages delivered by Monk or Ornette at the 5 spot. It is 1:33 a.m. in Tokyo, a Thursday. Death is whispering a song along a cold fretboard. So I'll follow a song about a bass player, of course, a poem about a bass player with a poem about a drummer. This poem has one simple constraint. Every line has 4 words in it, and it's called Confessions of a Percussionist. I am a timekeeper. I mark each line with letters set in perfect alignment. I have become very good at doing this. Nothing flashy, just words that occupy the spaces left to them by the more expressive presences. Things soft and hard, coos, screams. Yet, I supplement my timekeeping function with a different kind of interjection. Brief bursts that fill the spaces between lines. These flurries of stuttering, less evenly spaced events are always different from one another. For some reason, I am unable to repeat them, even though repetition is what I am otherwise proficient at. My inability to reproduce these irregular actions could be the sign of a certain incompetence or of great artistry. Where they come from, I cannot say. Blink. Shift your attention, even for a second, to juicier things happening in the same room, and you miss them. But that is exactly how it should be. Something sensed, not noticed, like a heartbeat, like the white line on a 2-lane blacktop, like the intervals between figures in great paintings. A measure is measured, a breath is drawn, and then undrawn. Wild imaginings flow into the instant voids, my clock-like, and then stuttering, not gestures count more vivid surely than 1, 2, 3, 4, again and again. But without such predictable pulses, without such perfectly evident units of black inked sound, every handful of angry lyrical song behind which my beats beat would spill away like December blood. The next poem is also musically inspired, but it's not part of the Dead Troubadours collection. And it's a transcription of an interview, an online interview with James Murphy, the founder and leader of the band LCD Sound System. And what I've done is simply replace the word band with the word poem in this extract from his interview. So I take very little credit for this. It's called Poetry as a Non-Professional Experiment from and for James Murphy. Being in a poem is a tough thing because I don't like leaving my life. And being in a poem means you leave your life. It's just the truth. You leave your home, you leave your friends, and you leave your dog. You leave your habits, your reading, and everything. And that's always hard. But I love being in a poem. And this is a poem about being in a poem that was never supposed to be this big a part of my life. It was always supposed to be a non-professional experiment. And I think it is still a non-professional experiment, but it's a non-professional experiment that takes up a much bigger part of my life than I expected. Music also enters into this poem at the end, but it's really more a poem about New York City. And I guess it's a poem about income inequality. Maybe those things are increasingly the same subjects, unfortunately. It's called Our Lady of Pompeii / John Lee Hooker. I acted alone, read the caption on the front page of a tabloid I hadn't yet seen as morning came, and I headed uptown toward Bleecker Street. It was time to think about New York City, because it was all around me. It was time to think about those who couldn't adequately enjoy the day I was walking into as into a poem by Philippe Jacotet, because of the insidious meshing of their parents' socioeconomic status and a system that reserves its greatest rewards for the owners of secret algorithms. Greenwich, Spring, Hudson, Van Dam, Varick, Carmine. If every passerby is a potential poem or a friend like, say, Holly or Bruce, or even both, then nested in every building is the outline of a mineral explanation of why things are the way they are. The Doric columns flanking the school door across from the cafe where I'm writing now with an espresso made by Joe, and this open notebook where I, too, act alone, not only support a name-bearing pediment, but are the concrete consequences of precisely those supple nets of obligations and expectations that interfere with the realization of enshrined rights scratched on to a sheet of dried animal skin that in any case extended no sheltering cloak to fractional citizens whose thumping commentary vibrated along the floorboards and through the jittery windows of tar paper palaces. To write better. What everyone wants to do, except someone with something to say that no one wants to hear. Years spent in pursuit, dreams of crisp type and mid-generous margins and stiff-textured pages, that elusive prestige, this endless self-congratulation and mirroring praise from similar selves, poetry is a decorative art. The best thing to do with an expensive contraption is to drop it from a hotel window so a passing kid might pick up a far-flung part. Holding out a little longer for something else, for something better, but better than what? Your earlier attempts? And above average effort by a Pulitzer Prize nominee? And what kind of better? In whose judgment? A Bach sonata, a lightning-twisted tree. I'm going to read now from, in its entirety, which is not a great lengthy entirety, a collaboration I did with the painter Trevor Winkfield that was published in a chapbook by the Song Cave Press. And it's called The Cry of Unbalance. Each poem is inspired by a drawing by Trevor, and Trevor then reading the poems I was writing would alter his drawings, and then I would respond to the changed drawing with another poem. So it's really a real back and forth collaboration. The form of this poem, which is a form I've used a lot, basically I write the poem from the middle out. So I begin with a phrase, a very short phrase, and then I add phrases to the beginning and the end of that phrase to create a longer section, and then add again to the beginning and the end of that section. And so the poem sort of grows from the inside out, kind of like a pearl. So there's a lot of repetition, as you'll see. And it's divided into 4 sections. 1, the throw that resists skill. It exerts an insidious charm, the throw that resists skill, which can even, in extreme cases, ruin a life. Expert luthiers, the last soffiatori of Murano, all those who perfected their craft over the inescapable 10,000 hours, none of them are exempt. It exerts an insidious charm, the throw that resists skill, which can even, in extreme cases, ruin a life. Who doesn't want to surrender now and then, dally with an unknown outcome, be surprised? The carving hand slips, oh shit. The heads of the figures in the gridded out painting fail to align, oh shit. Somebody who is supposed to know better made a mistake that can't be clawed back. Expert luthiers, the last soffiatori of Murano, all those who perfected their craft over the inescapable 10,000 hours, none of them are exempt. It exerts an insidious charm, the throw that resists skill, which can even, in extreme cases, ruin a life. Who doesn't want to surrender now and then, dally with an unknown outcome, be surprised? In any case, we are tired of mastery yet again. There are so many other lines I could have written instead of this one. Composition is compressed into a quick cubical tumble, which I watch, everything now out of my hands, awaiting in just a few seconds the finality of some black dot. 2, a dyed feather. It could be a costume detail, a natural ornament immersed in a bath whose pigments have lingered, a dyed feather that says nature has not completed its job properly. Despite the objection of purists, despite a continuing widespread insistence on truth to materials, it seems impossible to prevent resourceful artisans and enthusiastic hobbyists alike from attempting improvements such as this. It could be a costume detail, a natural ornament immersed in a bath whose pigments have lingered, a dyed feather that says nature has not completed its job properly, so let's keep searching. Straining for trivial effect, this gaudy, unfunctional sliver is located extremely far down our list of preferences, somewhere among frappuccinos, extended wah-wah guitar solos, and American prose stylists of the highest order. So yes, let's keep on searching. Maybe instead of a dyed feather, we might find a scribal quill, ideally suited to cleave black canalizations this way and that upon the sheet ice of our potentiality. 3, the scale of the father. The baby is weighed on the scale of the father. A record is kept. Everything that has ever happened, or at least the scraps recalled, has funneled down to this: a baby is weighed on the scale of the father. A record is kept. A life sketchily planned. Entry is made into the pre-existing order. A knife draws a circle. It is an ancient scenario. It's seemingly impossible to rewrite, but still we try. Everything that has ever happened, or at least the scraps recalled, has funneled down to this: the baby is weighed on the scale of the father. A record is kept. A life sketchily planned. Entry is made into the pre-existing order. A knife draws a circle, or some water is flung. They hand down majesty as well as misery. Listen to the cry of unbalance. 4, die further, skull. Flesh gone, brain evaporated, eyes gobbled up. Clearly, you have no more purchase on life, but die further, skull. or else I'd think me mad hearing your interminable, irrefutable discourse chattering its chilly message from the palm of my hand. One-time favorite prop of vanitas painters and gloomy playwrights, Mexican holiday suite, war crime leftover, emblem of buccaneers and secret societies, what a much death-possessed poet saw beneath the skin, etc., etc., etc. You are a ridiculously ubiquitous symbol that leaves no one quite unmoved. Flesh gone, brain evaporated, eyes gobbled up, clearly you have no more purchase on life, but dive further, skull, or else I'd think me mad hearing your interminable, irrefutable discourse chattering its chilly message from the palm of my hand. Ossified forget-me-not, who can't relinquish the lectern, 5 or 500 years old, you insist on repeating the same timeless wisdom. Technological advances leave you unimpressed as you push your way, sometimes gem-encrusted into even the most exclusive salons. Can't you see I'm in the mood for an altogether different kind of music? This only makes you grin all the worse. Dive further, skull, please. Can't you be silent like a stone? Yes, yes, I know what time erodes. Stop signifying before my head explodes. I'm going to read one more poem, which is the poem that appears in the anthology, which I recommend to anyone who's interested in poetry or surveillance. It's called Privacy Policy, the Poetics of Surveillance, published by Black Ocean. This poem, which is also published in this month's issue of Harper's Magazine, is titled Poem Begun on a Train. Excuse me while I adjust the privacy settings of this poem, so that if it's ever published, it will exist as a legible text and not as a string of stubborn phrases I silently repeat to myself. 3 lines written, now 3.5. Yet for the moment, no one but me has access to them as they stretch haltingly across the perfect grid of my Rhodia notebook, unless, that is, Amtrak has installed hidden video cameras above the seats in the coach class of this Northeast Regional, and one of them is focused on this very page. Whoa, that idea came a little too easily. The belief that your every move is being watched used to be a sign of clinical paranoia, except for those living under totalitarian regimes, in which case it was a perfectly reasonable assumption. Now it's becoming a perfectly reasonable assumption no matter where you breathe, no matter where you write. Let's assume that Amtrak hasn't installed individual video surveillance, at least not yet. Let's further assume that this poem, which is slowly crawling from pure potentiality to an intermediate state of being more concrete than if I wrote it by fingertip on a steamy window, but less so than the station signs howling past, has no other reader but me. Still, once I transcribe my handwritten draft into my MacBook Pro, a nearly inevitable step I am already contemplating and will have long since accomplished by the time you read these lines, it will have become so easily available to endless numbers of bureaucrats and hackers that I might as well post the whole thing online immediately. Every poet thinks about every line being read by someone else, even if, as the line is written, its author suspects that he or she may die before those words will win the attention of any other human being. Positing a reader, sympathetic or dismissive, is apparently necessary for every poem, from the most compressed, tongue-entangled lyric to stanzas as aerated and matter-of-fact as these. There are times, however, when a reader is not merely posited, but becomes as factually undeniable as the poem itself. What's more, instead of turning a cold shoulder or bestowing ceremonial kisses on a prize winner's cheeks, this invisible reader rattles a set of prison keys and is ready to dispatch an inconvenient text and author to a cold library with 0 opening hours from which nothing circulates except ashes. To earn shelf space in this grim depository, a poem doesn't even need to be written down. Think of Mandelstam's Stalin epigram, 16 lines recited to a few friends that signed their author's death warrant. Obviously, I don't have the slightest intention of comparing myself to Mandelstam or to any other poet riding within rifle shot of deadly auditors, nor for that matter to Muhammad ibn al-Dib al-Ajami, recently sentenced to life in prison, subsequently reduced to a mere 15 years, for reciting a poem on YouTube that displeased the Emir of Qatar. I can't imagine any poem I might write coming with such a price, yet I live at a time when writing and its surveillance have become practically synonymous. In Discipline and Punish, original French title Surveiller et Punir, Foucault cites Bentham's panopticon prison, where an inmate can't know whether or not he or she is being watched by a guard at any given moment, so must assume that observation is continual. In the present state of carceral society, surveillance really is continual, and increasingly it is undertaken by the subjects themselves. Fitbit, I read, is a small device to track your physical activity or sleep. You can wear the device all day because it easily clips in your pocket, pants, shirt, bra, or to your wrist when you are sleeping. The data collected is automatically synced online when the device is near the base station. After uploading, you can explore visualizations of your physical activity and sleep quality on the website. You can also view your data using their new mobile website. You can also track what you eat, other exercises that you do, and your weight. This is the world prophesied by Kenneth Goldsmith circa 1997, when he submitted himself to a week-long audio surveillance or attempted to describe his every physical action for a 13-hour period. It's also the world embraced by a new generation of digital literary scholars who employ data mining techniques pioneered by the NSA. True, poets have been engaged in self-tracking for a long time. Let no thought pass incognito, and keep your notebook as strictly as the authorities keep their register of aliens, Walter Benjamin advised. They've also sometimes operated on the other side of the fence. Wordsworth spying for England on his and Coleridge's 1798 trip to Hamburg. Basil Bunting working undercover for British military intelligence in Tehran until he was expelled in 1952. But more often they've been the ones spied on, like Hugh MacDiarmid, hounded in wartime Scotland as a communist agitator while he looked for a poetry of facts. At least he had the opportunity to lash back in a letter to one of his tormentors, a certain Captain Jock Hay. Quote, "It is intolerable that I should be subjected to inconvenience and misrepresentation by a fatuous blowhard like you, and I have no intention of submitting to it, even though the seriousness of it is mitigated by the fact that you are known as a windy ass and egregious buffoon and not taken seriously by anyone who knows you." Andrew McNeely, A Scottish Siberia, TLS, September 13th, 2013. In the prelude, Wordsworth was baffled at how men lived, even next-door neighbors, as we say, yet still strangers, not knowing each other's name. Now I know the name of 1,000 friends I've never met, and they mine. So what do I have to hide from any device capturing these lines to a distant database? My mind is filled with eavesdroppers and spies. I think 1,000 times or not a second before I commit to a phrase and leave trails of metadata I'm asked to believe no one will ever pursue. Rather than wallow in outmoded subjectivities, raw and naked to those unseen, all-seeing eyes, maybe it's better to simply claim existing chunks of language, as MacDiarmid did in the Shetland Islands in the early 1940s, transcribing lengthy passages from the TLS for his eventually abandoned megapoem, Cornish Heroic Song for Valder Trevlin. In June 1940, the authorities judged him a case for continued observation, and in the following March put him on the invasion list. It is probably unnecessary, Broom and White wrote to Major Peter Perfect, Box 5, Edinburgh, on March 16, 1941, as no doubt the local police and military are all standing around waiting to pounce on him, but to make assurance doubly sure, it might be as well to have his name added. I think we have plenty of evidence to justify this, but if you like, I will send you up a summary of our file against the man. The character Iris Henderson, Margaret Lockwood, in Hitchcock's The Lady Vanishes. Released in 1938, the year Mandelstam died, having tea in the dining car with a charming but penniless musicologist, Gilbert Redman, Michael Redgrave, when she glimpses the name that Miss Freud, Dame May Whitty, had left on the window a second before it vanishes, she bolts from the table and desperately addresses the travelers around her. I appeal to you, all of you, stop the train. Please help me. Please make them stop the train. Do you hear? Why don't you do something before it's too late? Redgrave and duplicitous psychiatrist Dr. Hart's Paul Lucas attempt to restrain her, but she breaks away. Before pulling the train's emergency cord and collapsing in a dead faint, she cries out, I know you think I'm crazy, but I'm not. For heaven's sake, stop this train. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Amid the fascist shadows, she is driven to hysteria because a text has vanished before it could acquire other readers. At the Whitney's Rituals of Rented Island, I walk into the squat theater installation, suddenly remembering evenings of radical performance circa 1979 as a long-forgotten line from one of Kafka's parables hisses around me in lo-fi analog. Nobody could fight his way through here, even with a message from a dead man. Thank you all.